Let's start the show. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. But enough of me, I'm here for you. On today's episode of the Fantasy Vulture, we're going to be continuing our All-32 NFL team preview series, taking a look at every NFL team through the lens of fantasy football. But before we start, I need 3 quick things from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style, so you never miss a video from me. Also, hit that like button down below, like an open receiver downfield to show your support for the channel and for this video. And lastly, shoot me a text, 330-302-1554. That's going to be my hub for all of my fantasy advice this season. You can ask me individual questions, and I'll be able to answer any question that you have with which as much context as possible. Man, I cannot speak today, but we're going to get right into it with a team that I am very excited to talk about because their fantasy outlooks could go one of 2 ways, either really good or really bad, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let's just jump right into it. And before we can talk about this year, we have to talk about last year. So week 1, Big Ben blows out his elbow, and the rest of the Steelers offense suffered greatly. Whether it was the injuries or whether it was just not being able to be productive because the quarterback play was so terrible. It was ugly for Steelers players for fantasy last season. Now in real life, it was still kind of fine because their defense was able to carry them to 9 wins, just 1 win shy of making the playoffs. But for fantasy purposes, it was really ugly. We were watching some of the worst quarterback play that we've ever seen, and a lot of players suffered because of that. But let's talk about Big Ben, who is back and is healthy this season. We have to talk about 2018 because he was so great, and obviously we don't have numbers for 2019. So for 2018, he finished as quarterback 3 overall. You can see his weekly finishes were incredible. 9 games as the QB1, 7 games as a QB2. He didn't bust for you whatsoever with QB3 or worse performances. When you take a look at his 2018 stats, damn near 700 pass attempts with 675, 452 completions, over 5,000 yards, 37 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. He was an absolute passing machine for your fantasy team and for the Steelers in 2018. Now for his adjusted score, we have to do things a little bit differently because he missed last season. So we take his 2018 numbers and we apply them to 2019 and just kind of parse and sort them through the quarterbacks that played last season. So when you take his 2018 finish and you apply it to last season, he now comes in at QB5, and that is incredible considering the outbursts that you've seen since 2018 with another year of Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson busting onto the scene, Dak Prescott's evolution as being a top 5 quarterback. So for Big Ben to still come in at number 5, considering all the changes in the league in just over a year, I mean that's still fundamentally unbelievable for your team. So let's talk about ADP, the ranking, and what are the outlooks for Big Ben this season. Truth be told, I'm not sure. His ADP is quarterback 18 going at 1206. I have him ranked at quarterback 17, and that's just because I don't know what this Steelers offense is going to look like, because last time we saw Big Ben, he had Antonio Brown and he had JuJu, and that was when, with the 2 of them, he put up monster numbers, and he even had James Conner there in the passing game as well, because 2018 was the year that Le'Veon Bell sat out the entire season. But now that Big Ben's back, he's now a year older, coming off of an injury, and his defense is now in a place where they don't have to throw the ball 675 times a game. So what do we expect from the Steelers offense this season? I think those passing numbers have to come down. Like, that just feels like an obvious fact. Could he still get over 600 pass attempts? Probably. I would consider that in the realm of possibility because I'm not sure how great this running attack is going to be, so they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. But 675 pass attempts is absolutely absurd. 5,000 yards is probably also absurd, and 37 touchdowns also feels unlikely to me. But despite that, Big Ben's one of my favorite late-round quarterbacks because of the potential of this offense. This offense still has a lot of really good pieces around it, and it's really just a matter of what their play style shifts to be. If they come into 2020 expecting to have a great defense and have a great offense, we're going to be golden. But if they expect to rely on the defense while kind of minimizing that offense in that way, just to kind of either protect Big Ben during the course of the season by running the ball a little bit more, or just Big Ben doesn't have it, then that's where I kind of have that conservative rank for him. But I see the upside. So if you want to take Big Ben and towards the later rounds of your draft, if you really want to wait on a quarterback, Big Ben is one of my favorite targets for that because you see the upside. The pieces are still there, and he could finish in a top 10 fantasy quarterback very, very easily. So I'm really excited for Big Ben, but I do see the potential limitations of this offense. Speaking of limitations in this offense, not because he's bad or anything, but just because he gets hurt all the time, that is Steelers running back James Conner, and that makes me so upset to say. I owned James Conner in a number of leagues last year, and it was a very up and down season as a James Conner owner. But this is where we have to parse things through a little bit because the 2019 finish doesn't fully represent what he actually did on the field. So for 2019, James Conner was the running back 33 in both standard and PPR. That's not great. That's actually really bad considering the fact that you probably drafted James Conner in the second round of your draft last season, coming off of his monster season in 2018. But then you take a look at his weekly finishes: 3 games as a running back 3, 2 games as a running back 2, 3 games as a running back, or 2 games as a running back 3. Meh. That's not great. That's not great from your second round pick. And then you look at his 2019 stats: 600 carries. No, 200 carries, 34 catches, 464 rushing yards, 251 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns in 10 games. Well, like, those numbers are super lackluster, and they aren't great. But you also have to remember that he only played in 10 games, so you have to kind of map things out for a full 16-game pace. But even then, when you look at those 10 games, it's not great. Like, if you were to take that, that's not even 1,000 rushing yards. You're barely getting over 800 there, if that. So James Conner was not all that great for you last year because of the fact that he was injured. You're missing 6 games from that full season sample size, and then you're also missing the time where he got injured during the game and then was out for multiple drives or missed the rest of the game. He was just constantly hurt for your team last season. But what I really want to focus in on for James Conner is what he did when he was on the field. And that was, he was very solid for your team. Now, he wasn't probably second round pick solid, but third or fourth round pick feels really comfortable for James Conner this season, and that's what we're going to talk about in just a moment. But with James Conner last season, he pretty much averaged 13 points a game for your fantasy team, and that's really good numbers for a running back too, if you choose to take him there. And when you apply those numbers to a full season, he now finishes at running back 18 instead of running back 33. There is a giant difference there. You're looking at a running back 3 compared to a running back 2, and you're pretty much looking at another additional half in between there. So what I mean by that is it's typically 12, right? A space of 12. And wait, does that make, that makes sense. I'm trying to think of how I need to say this. So a running back 1 is 1 to 12, a running back 2 is 13 to 24, and then a running back 3 is 25 to 30 to 36. So he's in the back end of running back 3, and he's in the middle of a running back 2. And that's really what I'm trying to say. So it's like you have a full gap and then some left over. And that's going to make a giant difference in how you perceive James Conner. Because if you were to just look at these stats and you're just like, meh, like, he really wasn't great for you at all last season. In fact, it looks like that he kind of sucked for you. But the reality was that he wasn't. 13 points a game is just really, really solid, especially for a guy that you're not taking in one of the top 2 rounds. Now, granted, that was the case last year, so he did end up hurting you. But that's not the case in 2020, where he is the running back 19 in ADP, going in the back of the 3rd, early 4th. I have him ranked at running back 20, and that is just because that, again, I don't know what this offense is going to look like. I don't know what James Conner's health is going to be. Just before I recorded this, he did say that he's playing this season. He was a potential holdout candidate because of COVID and his past history with cancer. So that does, I believe, make him what's the word I'm looking for? It makes him potentially more likely to get corona just because of immune system and things like that. But I'm going to leave James Conner on that fringe running back 2 range, back end running back 2 range, should I say? Just because I'm not sure what I'm getting from James Conner in 2020. I don't know what this offense is going to look like, But I do understand the fact that it is possible that James Conner finishes this season with better quarterback play and that offense revitalized as a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2. I just have him ranked at running back 20 because there are a few guys who kind of fall into that same category that I like just a little bit more. I'm going to pull up that list right now for you. So I have James Conner over Mark Ingram, Le'Veon Bell, David Montgomery, Raheem Mostert, Jonathan Taylor. I do not have him above David Johnson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Melvin Gordon, Chris Carson, Leonard Fournette. I would rather have those 5 guys than James Conner. And there's a chance I'd probably rather have Mark Ingram as well, but Mark Ingram is now competing with J.K. Dobbins, so he's going to get some more excitement from him. Le'Veon Bell's interesting over James Conner. I would be interested in hearing that argument. I think the Steelers' offense is better than that Jets offense, but Le'Veon Bell's volume in New York is undeniable. So I think that gets to the range where you start questioning yourself what guy you would rather have for your fantasy team. Overall, I like Conner. I think he's a really safe player, despite the fact that he is a little bit injury prone that we've seen so far throughout his NFL career. But when he is on your team, he's going to put up numbers when he is on the field. And that has me really excited for a guy that you can get potentially in the 4th round of your fantasy draft once your first 2 running backs are cemented. If you have James Conner as your 3rd running back, and that's what I had him as last season because I later drafted Aaron Jones. So I basically had Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, and James Conner. My team felt unbeatable at the running back position because I could beat you 3 different ways when all 3 guys were healthy. Now let's talk about the most polarizing player in all of fantasy football this season. That's JuJu Smith Schuster. Now, I have a history with JuJu Smith Schuster, and that is because last season in my Dynasty League, this was the first year of the Dynasty League, NEO's finest, we're going to make a whole video talking about my team there, I was offered JuJu Smith Schuster, DK Metcalf, and a 2020 second-round draft pick for Tyreek Hill. And I really thought about it. This was probably like week 3 or 4, so Tyreek's been injured for about 2 weeks or so. Big Ben's out, so we don't really know what the future outlook for JuJu held at that time. But I was sent this trade offer. Like, I spent my 2nd round pick. I had the turn in my dynasty draft. I spent my 2nd round pick on Tyreek after taking Todd Gurley with my 1st round pick. So was I really going to trade Tyreek for JuJu, DK, and a 2020 second? I thought about it, and I was just like, as great as Tyreek is, especially the fact that he's tied with Patrick Mahomes, you're getting incredible value. We've seen what JuJu can do, finishing as a top 10 wide receiver in 2018. He put up monster numbers with Big Ben. Big Ben's getting a little bit older, but then you're also getting this package of assets as well. You have to take this deal, because there is a world where JuJu finishes just as high, potentially, as Tyreek, plus you're getting those extra assets. So I took the deal. So I own JuJu Smith-Schuster now in Dynasty, and last season was not fun for me because of what happened for him last season. So he finished in both formats as wide receiver 66, absolutely atrocious, 7.7 points per game, 12 games played, at a little bit of an injury-ridden season there in the middle. And then his new finish was wide receiver 62, 70 targets, 42 catches, 552 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. I don't even want to go over the weekly finishes. What the fuck happened to JuJu Smith-Schuster last season? I'll tell you what happened. Quarterbacks weren't able to get him the ball, or he was just downright awful. I'm not really sure which. I've kind of seen both arguments. As far as when he played outside in the slot, he was not great at trying to break coverage. And obviously that's a big part of playing on the outside, is being able to beat your coverage. So JuJu is in this spot now where we don't know what kind of guy we're getting in terms of fantasy. Was he a one-year wonder, or is he actually a very, very talented NFL wide receiver who can produce for your fantasy team? And he's kind of in the same category as Odell Beckham for me, where I don't understand how a guy has been taken so high in the past that now has come crashing down in ADP. So JuJu's ADP is wide receiver 27 going in the 6th round, and this is where one of my biggest discrepancies is. I have him ranked at wide receiver 8, and that's why I felt like it was very important for me to tell you that I do have him in my dynasty team, And I don't believe that that's the reason why I have him at wide receiver 8. It's not like I'm just sitting here like saying, oh, I have JuJu Smith Schuster on my dynasty team. I need him to play well this year, so I'm going to put him higher in my rankings. No. I just believe in the bounce back. I believe that last year was an absolute anomaly of a season and then just a catastrophic disaster that I am choosing to just completely disregard it, because when you look at what happened to the Steelers offensively, it was just abysmal all the way around. So I'm going to take my shot on the guy that we've seen have extreme fantasy success, is being put back into the slot where he's most comfortable, and has his quarterback returning fully healthy this season, even if that quarterback is just a year older. I'm willing to take my shot and the bet on JuJu Smith-Schuster, especially at that draft price in the 6th round. You're telling me I'm getting a player with true top 10 wide receiver upside in the 6th round. This is the same thing I said about Odell Beckham. You cannot find this anywhere else between Odell and JuJu. It is mind-blowing to me. Give me JuJu Smith-Schuster every day, twice on Sunday, 7 days a week. It doesn't matter. Why? Like, this is the thing that you always have to think about. Every single year, there are guys that we set these expectations for, and every single year, they may bust. But what happens the next year? And that's the question that a lot of people are afraid to ask themselves, because they've been burned before in the past, and scars hurt, man. Whether it's a broken up relationship or just an opportunity not going the right way, scars hurt, and we have these scars and they don't fully heal, and that's why we look at them a little bit differently in that way. A lot of people were burned by JuJu last year. I was one of them. However, I'm going to take the upside of JuJu Smith-Schuster, especially in the 6th round, where I'm getting my wide receivers already cemented beforehand, or if I'm going in a 0 RB strategy, I can get JuJu Smith-Schuster as my wide receiver 1. Oh my goodness, sign me up. Please, I beg you, let JuJu fall into my lap that late in drafts. However, there was one player who had a surprisingly really good season in Pittsburgh last season, despite awful quarterback play. Deontay Johnson was really good for fantasy football, and it kind of blew everybody's mind. So even though his finishes were not great, his 2019 finish was wide receiver 40 in standard, wide receiver 41 in PPR, people were still surprised with how good Deontay Johnson was and how bad JuJu was, despite them having the same quarterback play. Now, when you look at the adjusted score, that kind of skews things down a little bit for Deontay Johnson. 8.4 points per game, 16 games played, a new finish of wide receiver 55. Not great, but what I really want to focus on is those weekly finishes. Because this was a guy that nobody was talking about before the season, and he only started getting buzz once his game started picking up. He had 4 games as a wide receiver 1, 1 game as a wide receiver 2, 3 games as a wide receiver, or 1 game as wide receiver 3, excuse me. Deontay Johnson had these games where he would just kind of ball out. I mean, you look at his stats from last season, like they were much better than JuJu's. 92 targets, damn near 60 catches, 680 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So now the question becomes with Deontay Johnson is, what are we getting from him this season? Because Big Ben's coming back, Johnson's going to play on the outside, kind of fill that AB role. Obviously, he's not Antonio Brown, but he's going to take over that outside role that AB used to have. And we've seen Big Ben support outside wide receivers like no other quarterback probably ever has before. Big Ben has this incredible history of pretty much supporting 2 wide receiver 1s throughout his entire career. For whatever reason, wide receivers just do really well in Pittsburgh. So I'm really excited for Deontay Johnson this season, especially because he is going late in drafts. So he's being drafted at wide receiver 46 in the 10th round. I have him ranked at wide receiver 38. And while wide receiver 38 is really nothing in the grand scheme of things, wide receiver 38 is still a guy that you can start as a weekly flex play week in and week out if you have to, if your team is riddled with injuries. Deontay Johnson's is a great asset for you to have, because he is just a guy that you can kind of start and play week in and week out. So I'm really excited for Deontay Johnson this season. That draft price is very interesting to me. He's a guy that I'm willing to take that late round shot on for sure. And just because of the fact that he's going to have opportunity in this role, or in his role and in this Steelers offense. James Washington has not panned out whatsoever for the Steelers. Yes, they drafted Chase Claypool, who I'm not talking about in this preview because I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant this season. And we also, with Claypool, we don't know what his role is going to be. But regardless, they need a receiver on the outside. They're moving JuJu back into the slot, and Deontay Johnson is going to fill that role. And because of that, he's going to be peppered with targets. He's going to get... Deontay Johnson could get over 100 targets this year, and that would not shock me in the slightest. Deontay Johnson is one of my favorite flyers late in drafts, and I will gladly take him in the 10th round once all of my starting spots are already filled, and then just kind of building depth and potential upside in my draft, starting with Johnson. All right. Finally, last player we need to talk about here is Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron, my man. First off, we need to congratulate Eric Ebron for kind of turning his career around because it was looking real rocky in Detroit, and pretty much the past 2 years, he's been pretty damn good for your fantasy team. We take a look at last season, tight end 23 in standard, tight end 28 in PPR, but that's not great. But once again, games played, only 11, 6.5 points per game, and a new finish of tight end 7. He was a top 10 tight end last year. 4 games as the tight end 1, 3 games as the tight end 2, 2 games as the tight end 3, 52 targets, 31 catches, 375 yards, and that should not say 53 touchdowns. That is insane. I believe it was 5. Let me pull that up. What a mistake that is. That would be an unbelievable number. Let's see. Eric Ebron stats. He had 3 touchdowns last year, so not 53, but 3. I apologize for that, but that's actually a really funny mistake right there. It's fine. So where do we take Eric Ebron in drafts this season? Coming off of the fact that he played really well last year despite some injuries. His ADP is tight end 19, going in the 3rd round, 308. And I've ranked at tight end 19 as well, so he's just in line with my rankings. I like Eric Ebron in theory for this offense because if Big Ben throws that ball 600 times again, somebody has to be on the other end of that. It can't just be Deontay Johnson and JuJu. So if you want to take your late round shot on a tight end that really no one is drafting, Eric Ebron is one of my favorite targets for that reason. But once again, you have to kind of manage your expectations just because of this offense. We don't know what it's going to look like, but Big Ben does have a history of throwing to tight ends, whether it is Heath Miller, who's just probably one of the better examples of that. Like, there is a history there. But ultimately, Ebron just kind of concerns me. I just don't know what his role is going to be within this offense. They still have Vance McDonald, so he's probably going to split time out on the field with him. But there is that world, man. We've seen it. Like, the breakout for Eric Ebron is finally here. And I just don't know what to do with it. I have very mixed feelings about Eric Ebron in that way. That's why I have him ranked so low. But there is the world, right? There's always the world where the Pittsburgh Steelers tight end finishes as a tight end 1. So if you want to take your shot, by all means do it. I just don't know if I'm comfortable with it. But look, you do what you want, right? I'm going to pull up my rankings here just so I can kind of think through this on the fly. So, let's see. So I'm at 19. Ahead of him, I have Chris Herndon, Jack Doyle, Mike Gesicki, TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant. Behind him, Greg Olsen, Dallas Goedert, Blake Jarwin, Irv Smith, Ian Thomas. Looking at that, like, do you take the shot on Herndon or Ebron? That's an interesting question. Because there's not a whole lot of competition in New York for targets. But you also have a better offense in Pittsburgh. So that's a question based on preference. On which side you value more. I'd rather have Gesicki. I'd rather have Doyle just because I think Phillip Rivers throws to the tight end more. And other than that, like, Eric Ebron is in this fringe of no man's land when it comes to tight ends. If you want to wait, if you're one of those people who wait till the very last round to take your tight end, Eric Ebron is the guy for you because then you can cut him after week 1, or you can keep him if he plays well. And if not, then you're better off taking your shot a little bit earlier on a guy like Hunter Henry, TJ Hawkinson, or Mike Gesicki, just to kind of get that stability at the position where you know what you're getting out of that player. But that's going to do it for our Pittsburgh Steelers All-32 NFL team preview. Let's bring me back up here. Thank you so much for watching. This offense is really weird to try and figure out. I don't know what to expect from them at all this season. There's a lot of guys where I see the upside and I see the potential, but when it comes to what actually is happening on the field, I'm not sure if that's going to match it throughout the season. And that makes me just really uncomfortable with the Steelers this season. But once again, the upside's there, right? I feel like you could hear it in my voice as I'm breaking down each player. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know. This defense is so good. They won't have to throw the ball more. Big Ben's a year older, coming off of injury. Do we value last season? Do we throw it away? Do we keep it? I don't know. I don't know. But that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you listened to this on the podcast, if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. We try to do this thing 2 times a day, Monday through Friday, for your daily source of fantasy football news and information. And with that, I'll see you next time. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. I can't talk. I need to end this video. Later.